For Washington lawmakers, the focus right now is on the issues of government spending, trade, and most of all, impeachment. But in Pittsburgh this past weekend, many of the 2020 Democrats were spotlighting another issue, education. 7 presidential hopefuls made their pitches to teachers and advocates. Here's a sample of what the candidates said.
We are going to make sure that every teacher in this country is adequately paid. That means at least $60,000 a year.
If you had $10 to spend, that's all you had to spend on education, I'd spend 7 of it on preschool.
All charter schools should have to meet exactly the same requirements that all other public schools have to meet.
This coming Thursday should see 7 of the Democratic candidates on stage together in Los Angeles for the next primary debate, which is being hosted by the NewsHour along with Politico. But a labor dispute involving the debate host, Loyola Marymount University, has raised concerns for the candidates. The dispute is between food service workers and Sodexo. That's a company contracted by Loyola Marymount. The union representing the workers has said that it plans to picket the debate. All 7 qualifying candidates have threatened to honor the picket line and to boycott the debate unless a solution is found. Some discussed the controversy over the weekend.
It's a terrible look for the Democratic Party to have a debate and that runs afoul of union work rules.
I don't believe we should cross that picket line, so I'm encouraging the DNC to try to work this out.
I believe that they are probably trying to work with all the parties to resolve this, because having these debates is critical for Americans to see the differences between candidates.
The Democratic National Committee said today that Chairman Tom Perez spent the weekend urging stakeholders to take part in good faith negotiations. Between this week's debate and impeachment, there's plenty of political news to digest on either coast. And that brings us to our Politics Monday duo, Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report and Public Radio's Politics with Amy Walter, and Tamara Keith of NPR. She also co-hosts the NPR Politics podcast. Hello to both of you. It is Politics Monday. So we are going to talk about the debate, but first let's talk about impeachment. Tam, as we heard Lisa Desjardins reporting earlier, a number of moderate Democrats are starting to announce people who were considered maybe on the fence, whether they are for and against. So far, most of them say the ones who've declared they're going to vote for impeachment. But where does all this stand, and how much does it matter how many Democrats?
Well, so Congressman Van Drew, who is apparently on his way out the door of the Democratic Party, is a pretty decent example of what happens when you are a Democrat who decides that you're opposed to impeachment at this moment. And his experience is simply that the Democratic Party of New Jersey wasn't there for him anymore. And he ran into the arms of President Trump, who's been tweeting nice things about him. So the problem for moderate Democrats, if they vote against impeachment, is that, you know, the sort of national Democratic grassroots money that's been flowing into a lot of their races, that would dry up, and they would lose sort of the energy of their local Democratic base, which leads to what you see, which is a lot of these moderate Democrats are now coming out in favor of impeachment. You know, they all but 2 of them voted to do to begin the inquiry, yeah, right. And if you voted to begin the inquiry, you're going to be brushed with that brush. Like you are not going to avoid this fight in your general election next year.
I think that's very fair. Although, I don't know how this is going to work out necessarily in the long term. Although, as I've said before, I'm very skeptical we're going to be talking about impeachment by the time we hit the summer of 2020, and that this is going to be on the minds of voters as they go into the voting booth in November of 2020. The short-term impact, though, let's not take away the fact that Jeff Van Drew switching parties and becoming a Republican, that's a big pickup for Republicans. Now, yes, they are still 18 seats short of the majority. But if you're looking for who won in the short term, literally getting a seat that you did not have a week ago is a pretty big victory. But I know we're going to be talking about our poll as well and what
We are
is
because
showing.
in fact, we can show everybody right now that public sentiment is still less than 50% for impeachment. You can see these numbers in November. It was 47 for, 46 against. It's about the same, even a few percentage point pickups. Amy, in opposition to impeachment?
I don't know if you remember this, but when we started talking about this, the number I said I was looking at was the percent of people who said that they disliked Donald Trump or they disapproved of the job he's doing, and how many of those folks end up in the I support impeachment. In other words, could Democrats get everybody who already says, I don't really like Donald Trump and I don't really like how he's performing as president, to support impeachment? If so, that would be a majority. But as we've seen in this most recent poll, you have 52% of voters in this poll, of adults in this poll, saying they disapprove of the job the president's doing, but only, 47 say that they support impeachment. So there's that. It's a small group. It's only 4 or 5%, but those are the folks that Democrats needed to flip, and they never were able to do that.
And the thing that stands out to me from our poll is that, when we asked them a couple of months ago, how likely are you to change your mind, or do you think your mind is pretty well made up? They said, our minds are pretty well made up. And guess what? Their minds were pretty well made up.
They were pretty well made up. Well, and we should give credit where credit's due. This is a joint venture, this poll. Marist College, PBS NewsHour, and NPR.
Which is why I said our.
I heard you say that, and I'm glad you didn't let me get away without identifying whose poll it is. So now let's talk about, Amy, the debate coming up and the 2020 candidates. It is the case that there is this labor dispute. We've just reported that Tom Perez, the chairman of the Democratic Party, doing all he can, but it is out of the hands of these candidates and the party. Clearly, all of us want this debate to take place. It's a debate being hosted by the NewsHour in partnership with Politico. But the candidates have made their position clear. They're not going to cross a picket.
That's right. They're not. And for a Democratic primary, there's absolutely no way you would see, if there's any sort of labor dispute, see Democrats going against that. Right. What I do think for the folks who would really benefit from having this debate, remember, it's the last debate of the year. It's the second to last one before voters start voting in Iowa. And for many of these senators, it's likely they're going to be stuck in Washington through this hearing for the impeachment hearing. We don't know how long it's going to be. Maybe it won't be that long, but this is sort of their last best opportunity to get in front of voters before we get into the craziness that is another impeachment trial or, talk of impeachment and then moving into Iowa.
What have you been thinking about this, Tam? What do these candidates need to do at this point?
I think what I'm looking for, what would be interesting, is drawing out some of the differences on something other than healthcare. There's been so much focus on healthcare. And leading into this debate, there's been a lot of back and forth, mostly between Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg, and mostly has been a lot of this fight of radical transparency that we talked about last week. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden have been able to sort of hang back, and the PBS NewsHour Marist College poll indicates that they are, in a national poll, right there at the top. They've been very stable. And so one question I have is, have the debates mattered that much? But here's another one. Maybe it will.
Well, we'll see. And Amy, it was striking to me that in this Marist PBS NewsHour NPR poll, 76% of Democrats or Democratic-leaning independents say that they still have not made up their minds which candidate. Is that typical for this stage of a campaign?
I think it reflects two things. One, this has been a very big field, and that's unusual. The second is that this issue of wanting to find the most electable candidate is a really hard thing to do before people actually start voting. So once the votes come in Iowa and New Hampshire and Nevada and South Carolina, Americans see those, they see who's winning, they see who's not doing so well, and then their opinions about candidates tend to follow that. And traditionally, voters go with a winner, right? People tend to jump onto a bandwagon. But we've also seen in 2008, there was an assumption after Obama won Iowa that he was just going to sweep through the rest of it.
And lo and behold,
that's right. Hillary Clinton wins New Hampshire, and it was back and forth all the way through June.
But your point is they're Democrats, voters struggling their way through figuring out who's most likely to beat Donald Trump,
Right.
which is what
a
in their
primary could
minds,
do.
what's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, when you say electability is the most important thing, but you don't know what it means to you or anybody else, then you end up with a situation with a lot of jostling.
Tamara Keith, Amy Walter, thank you both. And as we were just discussing, the PBS NewsHour Politico Democratic debate is Thursday night.
Look at what's happening to the American workers. They're being stifled.
We are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people.
They want what it takes to be part of America's middle class.
Proposals I'm putting forward would make me the most progressive president in my lifetime.
People are tired of the extremes in our politics.
We have a broken government in Washington, D.C.
What we need is a new voice and a new set of solutions.